Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. We don't have enough of these type of guests on the show, and so I'm really excited to talk to Dara Rosenbaum today of Rosenbaum and Taylor about her law firm, what she does to serve the needs of small businesses, and what people forget. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
How did you decide to go into law? Did you always know that was something you wanted to do?
I think right after I decided I didn't want to be a coroner, I went right into wanting to be a lawyer.
Okay, so let's go back to that story.
There's a very old show called Quincy. He was a medical examiner. And I didn't know at the time that he was pretty much like TV, medical examiner, private detective, private eye, international spy. So he seemed to have a really cool job. And once I learned exactly what an actual coroner did, I thought maybe that wasn't so much for me.
Yes, I can see that.
And right into wanting to be a lawyer.
Nice. And family members who are lawyers?
I do now. My sister's a lawyer, my sister-in-law's a lawyer, my brother-in-law's a lawyer, but not at the time.
Amazing. So you were the trailblazer in the family.
I tried.
Yeah. I tried. And did you know from an early, from that time, what you wanted to do, what you wanted to specialize in law?
I would say not really. I love the courtroom and I really enjoyed being in the courtroom a lot. But I think sort of more recently, last 10 years or so, last sort of half of my career, I've really gotten more into helping small businesses and small business owners and entrepreneurs. So I find that sort of is more my niche. It's sort of really where I love to be.
Yeah. And that is so perfect for the show today, because I think a lot of people don't realize the intricacies. I mean, even myself, when I accidentally launched a PR firm during the pandemic, and I should have gone to somebody like yourself to make sure I knew all the ins and outs of what kind of business I'm forming, what the rules were in different states that I would need to consider. Instead, depending on friends, maybe now former friends who, were in finance and HR, and thinking, okay, they have the level of expertise I need. So at what point do people usually come to you? Is it when they've already made some mistakes and are like, oh, I need to figure out what I'm really supposed to be doing here? Or is it when they're starting their businesses, or a little bit of both?
I would say a little bit of both. I would say sometimes it's people who are planning ahead and really want to kind of get things grounded the right way, get that right foundation, get some of their contracts in place, whether that's internal contracts with other partners or other owners, or external contracts with clients or vendors. Sometimes I hear from them then when they're first forming an LLC or a partnership or a corporation. Sometimes I hear from them when they feel like they're floundering a little bit and they're kind of confused. Things are coming at them, forms are coming at them, people are asking them to sign things, they're really kind of, fish out of water. And sometimes I hear from them when they're in trouble, when there's been a lawsuit, when the partnership, someone's trying to dissolve the partnership, there's some sort of dispute among the owners, there's a dispute with employees, there's a dispute with vendors or clients. So I would say all those three stages.
Yeah. And what are some things that you see that business owners are not thinking about? Like, what questions should they be asking themselves? And is there a checklist of make sure you're doing this and this process, these steps, to make sure that you're setting yourself up for long-term success?
I can't give business advice. I can't give legal advice in this kind of context. But I would say generally, agreements are very important. People overlook the need to have agreements with their fellow partners, with their fellow owners, with management. I think people often form businesses because they really enjoy each other's company, or they're on the same page about what kind of business to do, and they forget to really formalize that structure. They think that everybody's getting along in the beginning and everybody will always get along and everybody will always be on the same page and always have the same goals, and that's not necessarily true. So I think one of the things that I strongly recommend is when everybody's getting along and when things are first starting and everybody's on the same page and super excited, is really the time to formalize those agreements and those arrangements and those relationships.
Yeah. And I want to ask you all these questions, but I know that probably a lot of them you can't answer.
I can try. I can speak generally.
Yeah. So when somebody's coming to you midway, what is the common thread of issues that you see at that point? Is it that they didn't take time to do the contracts, or did they set up their business structure perhaps differently than they should have to maximize their protections?
I think sometimes they didn't set up business structure at all. They just sort of started working.
Okay.
I think that there's a place for that. I mean, I recognize that people don't want to and probably can't make a big investment in legal right off the bat because they haven't had profit yet. And the goal is to work and make some money and then maybe get all those formalities in place. I would say, meet with a lawyer early just for a brief consultation and get some of the ideas that of things that you need to be thinking about going forward. You may not be able to get that client agreement or that customer agreement, completely fully drafted, but you want to have an idea about the terms that you want to set. I think when people come to me midway, it's a lot of things they haven't thought about. It's because those friends that they have, who are in HR or in finance don't know all the things they should be thinking of. People come to me and they say, well, I have clients or I have customers or I have vendors and we don't really have anything in place, but they've been paying on time. Things have been fine. And sometimes they cancel and it's been okay. Sometimes the people say, listen, there's been a lot of, I don't know what the scope of my work is going to be. We haven't formalized that. Suddenly I'm working for somebody and doing a whole lot more work than I thought I was going to. And I'm not making the profit I wanted to. So I think that's a lot of things that people just haven't really thought about until they're in the thick of it and then realize that as things are going, they're not going quite the way they want to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we all go through these learning experiences and realize oh gosh, things would be so much easier if I had consulted somebody. But I think often people don't know where to start. So in terms of people finding you, right? And you working with a variety of different clients, what does that usually look like? Is it referrals? Are they like doing a Google search and finding your website? How do we know the right person to go to for legal advice?
I think it's great to ask people. Referrals are a great source for me. And I think referrals, I go with it takes a village. And very few people are doing something that nobody has done before. So somebody has hired a lawyer, or somebody has started a business. So there's probably somebody out there within your circle. And if you don't have that circle yet, build it. Because I think it's a really good resource to have, somebody else has hired an accountant, somebody has used a PR firm such as yours, somebody has done all of these things, and it's a good place to start to speak about those kinds of things with people.
Yeah. Do you have a specific type of small business that you like to work with, like specific categories, or is it just a variety?
I love entrepreneurs. I shouldn't say I'm partial to, but I love working with women. I mean, business owner myself. And as a woman, I feel like it's sort of an underserved market, I think, sometimes, where there are some, maybe some unique challenges that people have that they don't really necessarily think through when they're starting a business. So the small entrepreneurs are really where my focus usually is.
Yeah. And I do love the fact that you are a woman-owned business and you were an associate for about 11 years of your career before you decided to strike out on your own. What was that like, moving from being an employee to owning a law firm and deciding to even go out and start your own?
I would say I've been incredibly lucky. I've been working with the same partner. He was my boss for 11 years and we've been working here since 2011. So we started the firm together and we knew we could work well together, which I think is a key component. We knew our work habits, we knew our structures, we knew, how we approach things. So it was a really good partnership from that perspective. So that part was easy. I think what I didn't realize, and I think what so many entrepreneurs who are sort of, you said you accidentally started a PR firm during the pandemic. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that they're business owners. So, I was a lawyer and I was starting a law firm. And it took me a little while to realize, like, this is a business. I'm running a business. It's not just being a lawyer anymore. And now there's all sorts of, the financials and the HR and all sorts of other resources that I need. And that's when I reach out to my village and say, I know the law part, but help me on the other stuff.
Yeah, that's so important to have the right people. It makes me also think of podcasting. When I started this podcast, I was like, it's a hobby. And then I was like, it is a business. And I need to make sure I'm running it as a business. And I think particularly perhaps for women, we always want to think about other people. We always want to do what's right for other people. And it might be to the detriment of our own businesses. So I love that you have a heart for that and for helping women entrepreneurs because it's a growing marketplace. Do you see nuances in the way that women and men approach business and structure and setting up the right legal entities and contracts and all of that?
A little bit. I would say entrepreneurs as a whole, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of variety there. I think women have some unique concerns. How am I going to be, what kind of operating structure do I want to have with my business partners? You might be a mom, you might have family responsibilities to take care of, elderly relatives. You might have another job on the side. You might have something that's sort of bringing in the money, but this is something that you want to start on the side and hope to make it your full-time career. So I think those are things that I see more often with women. And I think that for me takes a little bit more detail and a little bit more, okay, let's think about how you want to operate the business. Are you going to be there full time? Are you going to have somebody who runs the business? Is your business partner going to run the business? Are you still going to be 50-50 if you're not there all the time? And you want to hash out all of those issues so that nobody's expectations are different and everybody knows what they're doing going in.
Yeah. I've started nonprofits and businesses with other women, and sometimes we've had those structures in place and sometimes we haven't. And I do think it goes back to like, oh, that kumbaya moment where we're like, oh, it's all going to work out and everybody's going to, yeah. And then you have one business in particular that I'm thinking of. I had a business partner who kind of like went in and went out. And the second time she decided to do that, I was like, all right, we have this agreement. I need you to sign over. We weren't making a ton of money at the time anyway, but I was like, if you're going to be out, you're definitely going to be out this time. And I think that can be difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't have to be a negative experience. It doesn't have to be something where somebody's storming out the door and slamming it behind them. Cool. It could just be somebody who's, moving to a different state. It could be somebody who says, you know what, this is not as profitable as I need it to be. I need to move on and do something else. It could just be a change in direction. Somebody who says, you know what, we need a big capital injection here because we have this great new opportunity. And the other person is a little bit gun shy and says, you know what, I don't want to take on this big opportunity. This is not the direction I wanted the company to go. We're still going to be close. We're still going to be friends. We're still going to be colleagues, but I'm going to move on. So it doesn't have to be this big dramatic divorce of a breakup. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't always happen.
And are there certain trends that you're seeing right now? Because I know, for instance, I live in California. So the laws and trying to figure out who's an employee or a contractor and how do you properly put them in the right category. And we're seeing that become more of a national movement now, particularly if you have people working in different states. Yes. So that's one thing I can think of. I'd love to hear your perspective on. And then, any other trends that you're seeing right now.
I'm seeing a lot of people starting businesses. I'm seeing a lot of people who are, getting that brave moment of deciding to start businesses, and whether they're going to be all in from day one or they're going to be working something on the side, or, it goes in every kind of direction. But I see that a lot. And I do see exactly what you're saying. I see that there's, there's a national movement toward more worker protections, and whether it's a non-compete agreement and protecting workers that way. There's been a lot of legislation about that, making sure that workers are protected. And I think there's a lot of education that goes into it as a business owner, because you can't just happen upon a website and find that there's this new law that you're not following, and you want to be prepared. You want to know that you're doing your wages properly, that you're categorizing your employees properly, that your agreements with management don't include those non-competes if they're not allowed in the state that you're in, or they're not allowed federally. So those are the kinds of things that you want to think about educating yourself on. And that's when your village comes in, and that's where your lawyer comes in, because you can have somebody on a small retainer who you could call a couple of times a year, check in with things, or have somebody who's going to send you their newsletter or send you an email saying, hey, Annika, I know this is, you have a small business and you were thinking about hiring somebody. Here's an issue that you want to be aware of.
Nice. And that was actually going to be one of my next questions is, I think one perception people have or misconception is that hiring a lawyer can be very cost prohibitive, particularly when they're starting out. So you just mentioned that people can be on a small retainer or if they need more legal help. So what does that look like day to day? And do you have specific packages? Do you tailor it depending on their situation?
I think I try to be very generous with my time. I know I try to be very generous with my time. And I understand, having started my own business back in 2011, that, that it's tight, and that you want to make sure that you're doing the right things, but you want to do them in a cost-effective way. So I try to price myself accordingly and make sure that I'm providing additional resources that my clients can use, even when I'm not on the phone with them. I'm sending them, an email telling them, hey, this is an issue you might not be aware of. This case came down. Hey, I saw something that might be of interest to you in terms of the way that you're working something. And then obviously those interactions are important too, where somebody's sending me a contract to review or somebody's sending me a document. So I try to do it on a retainer basis, and essentially they give me a small retainer and we work off of that. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes if it's going to be a project, I can do it on a flat fee, which means that I can We can set the fee right up front. We know what the expectations are, and we're going to get through this project for this amount of money. And sometimes that gives people a little bit more security in terms of, not worrying about calling the lawyer too much or not worrying about how long something's taking because they know what that flat fee is going to be.
Yeah. Do you also work with helping people understand when they need to trademark their name or, do any copywriting or any patent work with their product or service?
Yeah. I don't do intellectual property work myself. I have some attorneys that I refer things to. And that's another benefit of having a business lawyer is that we have connections to all kinds of other lawyers. When you have an immigration issue because of a particular employee and you're worried about visas, that's something that I don't handle particularly, but I know somebody who does and who does a very good job with it. So I do more of the protection from the litigation perspective and from contracts and agreements and negotiations and sort of general business guidance. And I refer people for those things like, trademarks, copyrights, and patents.
Yeah. And I know AI is a topic everybody's talking about right now, particularly in, my field, marketing, PR, branding. But I also have met future lawyers who are talking about, I got to work at, I got to do my summer internship, or I know I'm probably not using the right words because I'm not. And go through, the big books with all the cases and do all the research. And they're telling me that that's now going to be moving towards AI. So I'd love to hear your perspective on AI in the world of law and the work that you do, because I also imagine that there are people going, I can just have this contract written up with AI and think that that's going to be enough without necessarily having the right oversight or having somebody to make sure that everything is in there that really needs to be. And then also, in terms of the other work that you do.
I'm going to borrow a phrase that I certainly didn't make up. Somebody said that, looking at something on AI without double checking it or without confirming your source is like using Google, like into standing on a street corner, screaming your question and taking whatever answer you get back.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably fairly true. I think with anything with AI, we're going to have to be very careful. There have been attorneys who have gotten in trouble because they researched something using AI, they put it right into a brief, and none of the cases existed. Sites were not right. And when the judge realized that, the attorney was facing a lot of trouble and tried to explain and sputter through trying to explain how he didn't really understand what AI was and he didn't know that the cases that it was spitting back weren't real.
Oh my gosh.
So I would say that there's a time and a place for it. And with the appropriate, if you want to Google a symptom and then call your doctor, that's the kind of thing that I think you should do in the legal context. Yeah. I tell people use Google a lot in your relationships with your attorney as things to think about. Hey, I saw something. I'm not really sure how I want to handle it, but how do I write that into my contract? I've seen people get into trouble with using form contracts that they have online because they don't realize that it's written for a completely different state and a completely different circumstance and really doesn't apply and doesn't have the protections that they want it to. But you can take a form contract that you see online, work it through, kind of make your own notes about it, bring it to a lawyer and say, hey, this is the kind of thing I'm thinking of using. Can we use this as a starting point? And those are really constructive conversations to have because somebody's done their homework. Right. So I think of AI sort of in the category of, trust but verify, or maybe don't trust but verify. Now, use it as a tool, but don't use it as the answer.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. It is a tool. And I think people get really scared about that. They think it's either going to be the replacement, or they're scared to even delve into it. But it is a tool to be used like anything else, like when the computers, when we first had laptops or the smartphone or the internet. So
exactly. All those things when they're new, they're a little bit scary. But I think that if you use them the proper way, they can be very helpful.
Yeah. I can imagine that setting up your business, I know it's a big thing that for anybody, but if you have a lawyer helping you, I feel like that would have given me another level of confidence and a stronger foundation going into starting my business that I wish I had now, right? And so I wonder if you have any, you don't obviously have to name names, but are there any cases that you worked with, people that you worked with where you saw them really flourish because they knew that they had the stability, that they had everything in place that needed to be, and if something came up, they were protected?
I'll say one thing. First of all, I think it's never too late. So I don't think anybody should feel like I didn't start this the right way, so I shouldn't call a lawyer now. It's embarrassing. I didn't do the things that were right. There's no embarrassment in law in terms of those kind of things. So it's never too late to get things righted, to kind of right the ship. I would say I've seen clients, for example, come to me and say, here's my insurance policy. This is the kind of work that I do. For example, I'll give you an example of a window cleaning company.
Mhm.
And we're going to start doing lots of window cleaning with big office buildings. And here's our insurance policy. And I said, okay, first of all, your insurance policy only covers work at your own building. And they couldn't believe that that's what it said. It also did not cover work above 12 feet.
Oh.
And I said, well, this insurance policy isn't worth the paper it's written on. This is not what you want to go out into the marketplace with, because, somebody's going to ask for those kind of protections and you're not going to have the right policy in place. That's something that I think once they had the policy in place and they felt a lot more confident reaching out to business owners because they knew that they were properly protected if something happened.
Yeah.
And I've seen their business really grow just based on having us reading their contracts and getting the right terms in the contracts and getting, those right protections in place so that they know that there's more security going forward. I think that it's sort of like if you've set up the proper foundation, you're great to build a house on top of it. But if you're not really secure in your foundation, it feels a little wobbly and it's not necessarily as comfortable. So I think that's where I really see people succeed, is when they've reached out to the right professionals. They've got an accountant, they've got an attorney, they have whatever professionals might be specific to whatever it is they do. And they know that they can reach out to those people when they have questions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know you are in New York.
Okay.
Do you have to, as a lawyer, have a specific kind of, do you have to be licensed in multiple states to be able to work with people all over? What does that look like?
It's a state-specific license. So I can I can give general guidance to people who are outside of my state, but in terms of actually practicing law, I practice in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're giving general advice to people who are not in New York and New Jersey, can you take them on as clients, or
I can take them on as clients in more of a counseling kind of perspective, no legal work. So sort of more in the, general business consulting area as opposed to actually practicing law.
Yeah. And then through your network, you can help them find the right person to help them execute.
I'm just doing the kind of work that I do. I've met people all over the country who do the kind of work that needs to be done in those areas. So, I've worked with clients in Texas. I've worked with clients in California. So I think that, collaboratively, sometimes I'm doing more of the consulting and advising, and then somebody else is handling the legal work.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What are some other things that people should consider when they're looking at who to work with, when they're trying to figure out, how do I bring on a lawyer, and who's going to be the right fit for me?
Mm-hmm. It's a little like dating. I would say sometimes it's a personality fit. It's somebody who you feel comfortable calling. And like I said, there should never be any embarrassment. So if you're going to feel reluctant to call your lawyer because your lawyer makes you feel bad that you have a question or that you don't know something or haven't done something right, probably keep looking for a different lawyer. So I would think a lot of it's a personality fit, an experience fit. And it's really a gut kind of thing. It's somebody who you enjoy working with, who you're comfortable with, who you feel like believes in you and in your business. And I think that makes a lot of difference, as opposed to somebody who you feel like you're bothering them when you call, or you feel like they're not really invested in you. I think that somebody who is, as your lawyer, should be somebody who's part of your team and kind of part of your village, as opposed to, somebody who is sort of, perhaps not as comfortable to call.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think most people would think of, at least for small businesses and entrepreneurs, right? They would think about their lawyer as somebody separate. But so I love the fact that you're talking about, no, this has to be somebody who's truly like there for you and going to champion you, and not just be the person you call when you need advice.
And it's somebody who can point out those issues to you that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
Not those blind spots. And I think it's also somebody, and my goal is always to learn my client's business. Mm-hmm. So that I can make recommendations and I can make suggestions that are specific to that business, as opposed to general business advice. So once I learn my client's business, I learn how they work with their partners. I learn how the management team works. I learn how the employees work. Do they have 1099s, or they have employees? Are they hiring consultants? What is the business structure? And what's the goal? Is the goal to put the children through college? Is the goal to kind of do something on the side that fulfills them? What are the goals? What does the next 5 years look like? What does the next 10 years look like? And I want to be a part of that so that I can give good advice.
Yeah. Is there anything that would be one or two major takeaways from our conversation today that people should really think about wherever they are in the process of their business?
I would say don't be afraid of lawyers. We're your friends. And if you're not finding a lawyer who's going to be your friend and your ally, then keep looking. And I would say that formal structure is important, no matter how small you are or how early you are in the business. the formal structure is important. Formal agreements are important. Handshakes are great, but you can't take those to court.
Yeah.
So I would say that formalizing your internal structure with other people you're in business with, if there's somebody like that, or your external structure, how are you interacting with your clients or your customers or your distributors or your vendors, formalizing that is really important.
Yeah. And I guess one other question I have, do you hold seminars or workshops or anything where people can, hear how you speak, what advice you have to give them before they decide to jump in?
I do. And anybody's free to email me. You can provide my email address, but it's dlr@Rosenbaum Taylor. I do seminars, I do workshops. And one of the things that I try to do is, I do some introductory work with entrepreneurs to get their feet wet, to kind of understand, the basics. And it's a lot about knowing what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I do those kinds of things several times during the year for both experienced entrepreneurs, experienced small business owners, and then for those people just starting out.
Nice. Fantastic. I am working on a podcast coaching program right now. And a big part of it is, and I'm also working on a curriculum for university on that, but a big part of it is making sure you're set up as a business for success. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to check out your videos and see what your next thing is. This has been a really eye-opening conversation. I don't know that I've had this in-depth of a conversation about the ins and outs of things that people should consider, whether they are looking at hiring somebody, what questions to think about, or what you can help somebody with, whether they're starting out or midstream going, oh, I really need to talk to somebody to make sure I'm setting this up correctly for success in the future. I always like to ask if you have a favorite quote or mantra, some words that help you get by.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't get asked that one very often. I would say go for it. That's how I feel about entrepreneurs and small businesses. I feel like, if there's a dream you have, there's something you've always wanted to do, always wanted to try, there are so many different ways to, either jump right in or dip your toe in the pool. So I would say go for it. Entrepreneurship, small business ownership is really wonderful. It's something that is exciting. It's risky and it's difficult, and it's certainly not something that I would say is smooth sailing all the time, but it's absolutely worth it. So I would say go for it.
So those are great words to end with. And I just thank you so much for your time, Dara. And
pleasure.
Of course, we'll link to your website in the show notes as well, so people can learn more about everything you do.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. I got a lot of great advice out of it and things that I need to go back and think about. And I hope that you did as well. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.